I'm going to go over all the current year albums, mixtapes and EPs I listened to in January and February, share my thoughts and opinions, and at the end of each one, give my favourite and least favourite tracks on those projects, along with an overall rating out of 10. These are the timestamps for the albums, these are the timestamps for the EPs. Don't Be Dumb by A$AP Rocky. I've already done a full review on this album, so if you want to see my full detailed thoughts, you can go check it out after this video, but Don't Be Dumb is a month old now, and the question is, has it grown on me? No, I still think it's below average and very disappointing. I still find SCFU and Punk Rocky to be bad songs. I do admit Stay Here for Life has grown on me, to the point where I actually think it has replaced Stole Your Flow as my favourite song on the album, but my opinions on Don't Be Dumb as a whole still remain very unchanged. Casino by Baby Keem. I just put out my review on this album, but even though it's been a few days since I finished that review, it's a record that's actually been growing on me more and more each time I listen to it. I wouldn't go as far as to say that I would bump the rating to a 7, but Birds and the Bees and Highway 95 Part 2, while they still aren't highlights, do have more good things about them than I gave them credit for. My Ghosts Go Ghost by Storm. After dropping one of the most groundbreaking albums of this decade By the Time I Get to Phoenix, whose lyrical content had a lot to do with the devastating passing of member stepper Jay Groggs, the remaining two members of Injury Reserve formed a new duo called By Storm, with this album My Ghosts Go Ghost being their debut under this new name. To give a bit of backstory, Injury Reserve was originally a hip-hop trio that had been releasing amazing music since the early 2010s, but when By the Time I Get to Phoenix dropped, it was so boundary pushing and different, not only from everything they had released up until that point, but also from everything else in hip-hop. It's to the point where it's not even accurate to categorize it as a hip-hop album because of the vast range of other genres and sounds they bring on that album. From neo-psychedelia to glitch hop, the first track of the record even goes into a pure electronic direction. This album is as widely innovative as it is heart-wrenching, and these qualities are carried over to this new album under the By Storm name, where the two further explore these innovative sounds. While it is reminiscent of what they've already done on By the Time I Get to Phoenix, they take these sounds into different directions, with some instrumentals having more of a folktronica twist. And while I wouldn't say I prefer this album overall to the By the Time I Get to Phoenix, My Ghosts Go Ghost is still a groundbreaking album as well, and will go down as one of the most forward-thinking albums to come out of this year, as well as the most depressing. Love Is Enough by Converge. I'm pretty sad to admit that I'm not crazy about this album as many people are. I of course enjoy the band's music in general. Converge, for those unaware, are one of the most important and beloved metal bands in metalcore and mathcore history. They have multiple classics under their belt that are incredible, the most famous one being Jane Doe, an album so outstanding that it's not hard to see why many people claim it as the greatest mathcore album of all time. But as for their most recent album Love Is Enough, while I still think it's good, don't get me wrong, I am let down by how one-dimensional it sounds to me. There aren't many guitar riffs that stick out to me as much as they usually do when it comes to their greatest work, and I'm not that crazy about what Jacob does over these instrumentals either. While there are some good songs on here, Gilded Cage is the only one that I'd claim as being amazing, which is a different ratio compared to their other albums. Like, I'd say Jane Doe has many amazing songs on it, but on Love Is Enough, there's only one, with a few others being just good and nothing greater. Octane by Don Toliver. Don Toliver has never been an album's artist to begin with, but when he drops a great single, he drops a great single. He has proven himself to have a talent for creating incredible hooks every now and then, from the one on Lemonade that had everyone in a chokehold during the summer of 2020 to the one on Too Many Nights. However, when it comes to his solo work, there's usually one or two tracks that are on that level of quality on each of his albums, maybe 3 if he gets very lucky. But on Octane, Don Toliver has reached a point where I can't even recall a single one. The issues I have with this album are somewhat similar to the one I had with Lil Tecca's latest album, where it's just a long collection of half-baked song ideas that are so substanceless and directionless that it makes me terrified of what tracks were left in the vault. The tracks on both of these albums have relatively brief runtimes, which only makes the already mediocre songs feel even more pointless and forgettable. But I can give Tech a credit for having Dark Times and Over on his album. As for Octane, the only above average song here is the one with Travis Scott, but the main appeal of that song is mainly Travis and the beats, not so much Dawn. At this point, it feels like all the potential I saw when he first broke onto the scene is gone now, as he just keeps dropping one disappointing record after another, and Octane, this has to be his worst album yet. Happy New Year by Gumshoes. Gumshoes, aka Sam Sparks, is a homespun project based in the UK. I'm literally reading this on Spotify because there is very little information about who Gumshoes is, but I first got introduced to Sam's music in early January last year, simply because the album cover for the Gumshoes album released at the time, Bugs Forever, caught my attention, and while I wouldn't say it was one of the best albums to come out of last year, it certainly was the most charming and happiest. The song Settle Down actually landed in my top 50 best songs of 2025. The album had such charismatic, joyous singing, like you could hear the joy in Sam's voice as he sings those lyrics. The album instrumentally had a heavy emphasis on upbeat, playful pianos, but Happy New Year this time seems to incorporate more synths into the mix. By comparing the album covers for this album and Bugs Forever back to back, you can tell that this record takes a different emotional approach. This album has a pretty creative concept behind it, with each song about a different character. What all these characters or people have in common, I believe, is that they are all alone on New Year's Day with no one to celebrate with or no celebration to attend. So lyrically, it's quite depressing in a way, as the lyrics explore the loneliness and isolation these people are experiencing, but musically, just like Gumshoes' previous albums, the record couldn't be more upbeat and happy sounding. If you want to be put into a good mood, go check it out. The Apple Under the Sea by Hemlock Springs. This is the debut album from pop singer Hemlock Springs, and I've been enjoying her music ever since I was first introduced to her 2023 EP, Going Going Gone. It was full of quirky, playful, fun bops with expressive, cartoonist vocals. When this EP came out, I found myself wondering what direction she would take for a first full-length project. If she delivered more of what she gave us on this EP, it would be fun, but it might start to feel repetitive. I did have that worry going into this, but wow, it's like she's taken her sounds to new heights with this one. There's actually a lyrical concept going on in this album that is pretty focused, and it's like her singing has gotten better too. The album is just improvements on all fronts, and while her EP felt like a loose collection of bops, the experience of this album feels like I'm inside this fantasy wizardry world. It's borderline surreal. This is my favorite pop album of the year so far. Even The Devil Smiles by IDK. Before the release of this mixtape, I'd never been a big fan of IDK's music. While he does come out with a good song every now and then, there really wasn't much about him that I felt set him apart from his contemporaries. I thought he made standard, decent, but nothing special rap music for the most part, but I could have never guessed how amazing this mixtape was going to be. Not only is it lyrically more focused and captivating than anything he has done before, but the choruses are more consistently catchy than they've ever been, the beats are more interesting and versatile, and the record flows through a different range of emotions and moods from track to track. A handful of the songs explore the topic of IDK being arrested at the age of 17 and set to be released in 2025, but he was released in 2012, earlier than originally planned. These tracks essentially explore the events surrounding his arrest, his time in prison, and the surreal what-if thought of how IDK's musical career would have turned out if he had actually stayed in prison until last year. There are so many amazing songs on this tape, such as the one with a posthumous feature from DMX, which is an absolute banger, as well as the super catchy Halo. IDK really surprised me with this one, because to see such a big jump from the mid to decent stuff he's released before to something this amazing, for the first time ever, I'm actually very much anticipating what he has in store for us in the future, and officially considering myself an IDK fan from now on. The Fall Off by J. Cole. I've already done a full-length review of this album, and I don't have anything to add to what I've already said, apart from the fact that the song Man Up Above did grow on me, and it is now one of my favorite tracks. To To Whom This May Concern by Jill Scott. When it comes to neo soul, the big three of that genre are what many people, including myself, would consider to be Lauryn Hill, Erykah Badu, and the late D'Angelo. But I've always felt like if one more artist could be added to make the big four, it would be Jill Scott. It's been nearly 11 years since her last album, I believe, and an even longer time since her last amazing full-length project. While she is well past her prime at this point, with this new release, To Whom This May Concern, you might as well say that she's back in her prime again, because this album is amazing. For the 19 tracks this record has, it does a great job of bringing enough variety in sounds and lyrical themes to keep it engaging the whole way through. While we get those excellent smooth neo-soul jams, we also get some unique moments, like the vocal jazz track Pay You on a Tuesday, which is full of hilarious attitude. I mean, because there are quite a lot of tracks here, there were bound to be a few underwhelming moments, like I anticipated so much more from the collab between Jill and one of my favorite rappers out there right now, Jid, especially since Jid usually kills it with his features, but unfortunately his verse is just okay and Jill's chorus here is one of the weaker ones on the album. But still, this is overall an excellent return to form, and even though her career has lasted longer than I've even been alive, I hope this is only the start of a new era, because if she can still make music this good and this full of personality after so many years, I can't wait to see what else she has in store for the future. Piss in the Wind by Joji. After what feels even longer than a 4-year wait, Joji has finally released the follow-up to his 2022 album Smithereens, and let me just get this straight out of the way, this was 100% not worth the wait at all. There are 3 track EPs out there that have more interesting things to offer than this 21 track album. It is full of dreadfully boring choruses that sounds like they took seconds to come up with. For example, what about the long repetitive one on Can't See Shit in the Club was good enough for it to land on the album? The tracklist is already long enough, get that shit out of here. Past Won't Leave My Bed has a tune that is identical to the one in one of the best songs of Radiohead's The Bends, High and Dry, but without pretty much everything that made that song so amazing. There's also a Yeats feature on Rose Colored. While he did actually fit in with the vibe of the album better than I thought he would, by that same token, I also feel like Joji slapped him onto the song without a good sense of how he wanted this track to truly sound. His inclusion doesn't sound out of place, but it still feels unnecessary. I mean, who in their right mind would hear a slow, chill jam like this and decide to have Yeet on it, of all people? Despite the large number of tracks on here, there unfortunately isn't a single one that was worth coming back to. I unironically had more fun listening to Pink Season. I Am by Lexa Gates. I already made a short review on this album, here it is. A$AP Rocky's Don't Be Dumb wasn't even the best album of the day, because on January 16, 2026, rapper-singer Lexa Gates dropped I Am. Her previous album reminds me of Mac Miller's jazz rap stuff, but with the elegance of an Amy Winehouse song, and I could pretty much say the exact same thing for this album too. The instrumentals throughout have lots of pretty jazz and soul samples, with Lexa delivering smooth flows and chill choruses over them. I admit that she isn't really pushing her sound forward in any new directions. There are tracks on here that, if they were to land on her previous album, would not sound out of place at all. So while it does feel like a continuation of what she did on her previous album, there are still some great songs on here that are worth checking out. Subscribe. A few things I want to add. Lyrically, unlike other famous jazz rap artists, the things she raps about aren't really something you'd typically focus on in her music. She's not bringing conscious lyrics like you'd expect from a Roots song or those humorous lyrics from De La Soul's debuts. Instead, her lyrics are more romantic and about her bougie luxury lifestyle, which does go well with the elegance and richness behind the production, and they're delivered with this uncaring, confident attitude. That was how it was for Elite Vessel, but this time around, while these topics of luxury still appear throughout this new album, it seems like she's also being more personal and revealing more of her emotions. So I guess it is more personal than a previous album, but other than that, she's pretty much delivering what she has already delivered up until this point. There are tracks on here that would accurately fit in with the vibe of Elite Vessel and vice versa. It's still a good album and I'm still sticking with the rating I gave it originally, but I really hope she ventures out more in the future because right now, Lexa is a one-trick pony. URGH by Mandy, Indiana. There are a lot of insane, loud and in-your-face moments on the record instrumentally. On Magazine, there's an awesome moment where the thumping, piercing drum beat suddenly transitions into this borderline electronic house one in a way that's so smooth you don't even notice the transition at first. Lifehex has an even more epic change of drum pattern as it transitions from a hardcore one into something like an EBM beat. The guitars on the same track are wailing and shrieking, nearly sounding like vacuums. The stadium-like drum beat in Dodecahedron reminds me of Kanye's Black Skinhead. This far into the album, I couldn't really make sense of why the album cover is so colourful and bright, even though the music on the record sounds darker to my ears. But then when this wave of keys that I believe are glockenspiels come in, it's like being flooded with flashes of bright saturated colour. And due to all the insane and vigorous electronic instrumentals throughout the album, I was really curious about how the Billy Woods feature was going to smoothly fit over these beats, because since he is an abstract hip-hop rapper, and judging from the beats I was hearing prior to the song he's featured on Sicko, I couldn't imagine how his talking like flow would fit over beats that are this wild and constantly changing. But then when Sicko came on, he surprisingly sounded so smooth over it that it's as if he was born to hop on this instrumental, with all the booming distorted bass and these synths that has this UK grime vibe to them. This is more of a beat I would expect Danny Brown to hop on as far as modern day rappers go, but Billy Woods is actually proper switching up his flows, and while his voice isn't as loud and energetic as the production, his straightforward delivery actually works out nicely in a strangely fun way. It's a really solid album overall and blends electronic and industrial rock music together in super aggressive yet fun ways. Empty Hands by Poppy, once one of the most attention-grabbing characters on YouTube, Poppy has really established herself as one of the most exciting faces of the metal scene over the years, with I Disagree containing some of the catchiest metal tunes of the 2010s and her Eat EP being all killer no filler. Ever since that amazing Eat EP though, she hasn't really put out a project that was on par with the creativity, uniqueness or catchiness of either of those two records. After a few more records, we now have her latest released, Empty Hands, which is a decent album but still far from her best. There are some interesting moments like The Wait, which sounds like Imogen Heap making a metal song, and then Eat the Hate is a banging bop with an instrumental that sounds like something that would have landed on a Nirvana album, but the overall experience is brought down by a handful of filler tracks that I'm borderline dying to forget. I enjoy the more singy, melodic metal tracks on the record a lot less than the aggressive, louder moments. A Rhythm Absolutes by Sunday Mourners. I checked this album out because Fantano did a positive review of it, and yeah, I'm glad I did. This is a really catchy art punk, post-punk album that reminds me of Television, especially through the lead singer's vocals, which reminds me of Tom Verlaine. The bands can go from straightforward, brief, hooky art punk tracks like Love Observations, which is probably the cutest and most endearing song on the album, to lengthy jams like Darling, a 12-minute song that turns into an amazing extended jam. It's like the Marquee Moon of this album. Despite this being the band's first album, they display more versatility, creativity and talent than most debut albums from modern bands that are 1,000 times bigger. Xavier by Xaviersobased. I was pretty excited to go into this album considering I really like Che's Western bass, and as these two have overlapping styles and fan bases, I went into this expecting more of that great trap rap rage sound. This is my first time listening to his solo music, by the way, and I was a bit taken aback by how different his music sounds, not in like a bad way though. While Western Bass is a vigorously fun, in-your-face rage album that has a lot of punk energy, Xavier in comparison is much more atmospheric and chill. It leans more into cloud rap territory than anything to do with rage. In fact, Xaviersobased does have quite a versatile range of different voices and vocal deliveries, but not each one is as engaging as the next. I find the really monotone and sleepy one pattern that he uses on tracks like Pax Gone to be really boring, even if it does fit in with the atmospheric and slow vibes of the beats. His flows are just as inconsistently captivating too. There's a handful that sounds so sloppy that it's mind-numbing. Xiu might be the biggest example of this, because that beat is just as mind-numbingly minimal as the lyrical content and the range of flows. But what's possibly even more mind-numbing than this is Work Work, which sounds like a complete mess due to how terrible the layering of vocals and that overly glaring loud skirt ad-libs were done. A few good bangers do shine through this mixed bag, such as That Shit For Real. Even though I do wish he brought more energy to the chorus, it's still one of the catchiest on the album. I also found 100,000 to have an instrumental so beautifully magical that it's borderline heavenly, to the point where it does make up for some of the underwhelming flows that Xavier brings over it. I've seen people complain about the lyrics on this album, but I can't recall a line that was so bad that it caught my attention, though I can recall a line that was so good that it caught my attention, and that was the YouTube poop one. But overall, I found Xavier to be disappointing and bloated, with runtimes that are too brief for the tracks to stick the landing successfully. Xiu motherfucking Xiu Volume 1 by Xiu Xiu. Beloved experimental rock band Xiu Xiu has just put out another covers album back in January, in which they take a unique selection of tracks and put their own twist on them, turning songs like Glorilla's Lickle Some into a dark wave song. Some of the other tracks go in an industrial or experimental rock direction, but all of the songs here overall creates a pretty dark and ominous experience that is especially enjoyable and exciting if you are already familiar with the original songs they're covering. I mean, again, I could never imagine a Glorilla song being turned into a dark wave context, but here we are. There are some songs that overdo the noisy and ominous approach like Hamburger Lady, but that really boils down to personal taste, because I'm sure there is a group of people out there who will absolutely adore how weird songs like that are. With Heaven on Top by Bryan, it's not as adventurous instrumentally as his other albums. It is very one-dimensional for its length, but I do think the horns add positively to the songs. Appetite especially feature one of my favorite horn lines on the album. They add a victorious edge to the track, even though the core lyrics aren't executed as well as I think Zach was attempting. I should also mention the strings on Always Willin'. They serve as the backbone of the song and are a big reason why it's arguably the best track here. I guess my main issue with Heaven on Top as a whole is that I wish there were more versatility in its production, and it's too long. Now I'm gonna get to the EPs. KUNTOLOGY 101 by Aliyah's Interlude. I've been loving Aliyah's Interlude's music ever since her amazing hip-hop garage house bop IT Girl first blew up, a song that's so fun, pink, colourful, and filled with Y2K aesthetics. If the Roblox game Dress to Impress had a theme song, IT Girl would be it, alongside Fashion Icon. After a series of singles released since that song, she has finally put out her first EP, KUNTOLOGY 101, which is pretty much a collection of those confident, quirky, and colourful bops that you already know she's good at making, which I guess is both a pro and a con, since while I do love that we get more of those type of bops, it does sort of prove her as a one-trick pony, but I still think she has the talent to experiment more and be more versatile musically. I really hope she dives into more sounds and extends her song structures when she releases her debut album. Retrogading by Mars, Acoustic by Azul Kechi. Azul Kechi is an underground R&B / pop musician whom I mentioned before in my top 50 best albums of 2025 video, as I found her album Celestial Love to be quite amazing and super underrated. And on this EP, Azul and her team take some of the key tracks from that album and put them into an acoustic setting. I feel like in a few instances, replacing the original instrumentals with jazzy acoustic laid-back versions does take away some of the vibe that made those tracks so appealing in the first place. This most applies to Celestial Love in my opinion, as the dreamy intergalactic atmosphere that the original instrumental created isn't present anymore. The stellar glittery keys of the original instrumental were also the backbone of what made that song so addictive, but since this version doesn't carry those aesthetics anymore, it feels more lifeless, though not entirely trash honestly. The core tune is still there, but the vibes aren't. But then in the following song, Don't Stop, making an acoustic version just makes so much sense, since the song itself is arguably the most calming and soothing track on the original album, so the fact that it's even more chill and laid back with a slower acoustic instrumental this time makes perfect sense and just make the track even more therapeutic. However, the true highlight of this EP is the closing track, a 10-minute acoustic version of No Drama that sounds absolutely lovely. It features a 5-minute instrumental outro that shifts the focus to the piano keys from the original track, bringing them to the forefront and making it even more progressive with additional layers of keys. Typically when musicians make acoustic versions of a record, it feels like they're doing it for the sake of getting more streams in a quicker and easier way than putting out a full-length project. However, I feel like Azul and her team actually put heart and effort into it in a way that is pretty admirable. A Love Song For You by Eem Triplin. I first heard about this rapper through the song A Love Song For You on Valentine's Day, fitting, and it had such a distinctly unique sound that I just had to listen to the rest of the project. The beats throughout this EP are almost like lullabies with how dreamy, fuzzy and lo-fi they sound. The dreamy keys makes me feel like I'm floating on a cotton candy cloud in star-patterned pajamas, and this dreamy, somewhat relaxing atmosphere that these instrumentals bring does go hand in hand with the romantic lyrics and the calm and collected vocal delivery he brings to the table. You can feel how in love he is through his voice, and over the beats he brings some pretty infectious melodies. Even with how hazy and laid back this EP is, it's still very melodic. The Boy Who Cried Terrified by fakemink. British rapper fakemink, best known for his slow and chill cloud rap jerk sound, has just dropped his EP The Boy Who Cried Terrified, and it's a pretty good collection of songs. Now I have to admit, his debut album London Xavier was an album that I couldn't really understand why it was so beloved. I just found many of the beats on that record to not really deliver anything uniquely fresh or distinct that we haven't heard before from the cloud rap genre. They mostly feel sort of by the numbers for cloud rap standards in my opinion, and I didn't really find the hooks he delivered on top of it all that good either. However, the beats on this EP are more standout. The tunes are catchier this time as well. Blow the Speaker still can't get out of my head. I'm not super blown away by the project overall, but it does slightly build up anticipation for when he releases his next album because of how surprised I was by actually enjoying some of the tracks here, despite not really liking London Xavier. Please like and subscribe.